to another session of Creative University, another great one. My guest today is going to be LC Crowley, who's the CEO, founder of Trioscope, but so many other things. And as all sessions, always start with the song. That's a song called When I Paint My Masterpiece by the classic group, The Band. And I gotta say, LC stumped me on that one, because what I always do, I always ask my guests to pick a song, any song that they want, to be the lead into the session. So let me introduce you. So LC Crowley, there he is. How are you doing, LC?
Hey, Peter, how are you, man?
Good. And you are in Atlanta today, correct?
I am indeed. I am based in Atlanta.
Okay, well, excellent. So LC, before I begin, let me just let me give a little bit of your bio, because it's a fascinating one. So LC is CEO of Trioscope Studios, which is dedicated, and it is revolutionizing the creation of content. And it's really fascinating. It uses its own enhanced hybrid animation platform. That's what they call it. And it marries human performance within animated environments. So it's pretty amazing. It's developing a show right now for Netflix called The Liberator. And I think that's your first Trioscope studio production.
It is indeed, yes. It comes out later this year.
Okay, and then LC also founded School of Humans, which is a multi-platform storytelling studio. And he's created a number of animated and live action TV series that one's Screenland, it's on Netflix, Daytime Fighting League on Adult Swim, World of Hurt, Vice, and many, many others. But LC also has a deep advertising background, and he was an executive creative director that worked with major brands like Mercedes-Benz, and his work won several awards, and I'm just gonna name one of them, Cannes Lions. So like, with really interesting background. And I think the topic today will be fascinating too. One more thing before we begin, I just wanted to say that the previous video sessions are all online too, guys. And we're gonna be turning LCs and the other conversations into a podcast too, because we think that will be very, very helpful. And a lot of people really wanted that and want to participate that way. So, you know, we have people online asking questions today, but we also have a lot of people who watch these sessions on demand. So tell us, before we get into your journey and your thoughts, tell us just a little bit more about Trioscope and School of Humans and anything that, you know, at a high level.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll start with Trioscope because that's the latest company that we've launched. As you mentioned, we've developed an in-house proprietary technology, which we call the Trioscope Enhanced Hybrid Animation Platform. It really is our mission to sort of further the category of animated drama, right? And in a way that hasn't really been done before. You know, that adult animated comedy is very much on the rise over the last many years. Certainly even since COVID, it has really increased. But adult drama in the animation form is still something that we think has an immense amount of untapped opportunity. You know, you've got in places like Asia, obviously anime is quite popular around the world and often, you know, has a dramatic bent. But we really set out to sort of see if we could tap the magic of animation, but bring in, you know, the emotionality of your favorite sort of big budget drama as a way to particularly, you know, speak to adult audiences who may not necessarily consider themselves animation fans. It's considered, you know, most people I think around the world, or an awful lot, think of animation as a kids or comedies sort of medium, and we wanted to change that. So we put human beings at the center of what we're doing. As you mentioned, our first series comes out later this year. It is a World War II drama called The Liberator. We're very excited about the launch of that show. A very important true story, and, you know, obviously a very important moment for us as a company. Trioscope Studios was launched out of, in sort of an incubator fashion, our other company, which is called School of Humans, which you've mentioned, multi-platform production company. We have an audio storytelling division with an overall deal at iHeartMedia for distribution. and we make television shows for the likes of, as you mentioned, Adult Swim and many others, Discovery Channel, those kinds of places. And you know, that company, just to give you a quick backgrounder, that company has always been sort of a think tank. We've always sort of followed our creative passions to tell particular types of stories, whether those are documentary in nature or scripted or hybrids of those things, animation or live action, and really just sort of go wherever those passions have led us. And that is why that culture that we built in that company is how Trioscope came to be. And we're very excited about that. And certainly by far, it's been our biggest idea at School of Humans to launch Trioscope out of it. And now, you know, Trioscope is standing on its own as its own company.
No, that's very, very cool. And so for School of Humans and focused on multi-platform storytelling, it's something that I write about and talk about a lot, which is, you know, the engagement across all these platforms, where a lot of production companies still don't understand that consumption is done. The way we watch stuff is very different, and depending on where we are and what we're doing and how we want to do it with others, whether we want to make it social. And then this combination, this hybrid sort of content development, revolutionary not only in the product but also in the efficiencies that come into content production and costs and all of that kind of stuff too. So multi levels of innovation here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we knew that if we were going to try to convince, you know, the big streamers and other content buyers around the world to take risks on animated drama, that we were going to have a really good cost proposition to go alongside that. You know, you can't sort of say like, hey, buy this thing you don't know you need, and by the way, it's exorbitantly expensive. That wouldn't really be a thing.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we think that, you know, we talk a lot about Trioscope as a rabbit hole to an entire new category of content that exists. And we've seen that over and over with world-class creators, big names you'd recognize, seeing what we're up to and coming to us saying, hey, I have a story I want to tell in Trioscope, because I've never seen a medium that would fully capture it, either because of the scope of it, or maybe there's the cost of it because of that scope is too great. So it's been very important for us to have something that can really scale across that opportunity. No easy feat, but you know, we're getting there, I suppose.
Well, look, and for all of you students out there, and because you're in the middle of it, you're the ones who are really driving change in terms of the way that the media and entertainment business is working. You have this, like Jenny Morris, who's going to be coming on with HBO Max. The economics with that kind of a service are radically different than the economics, of course, with the traditional media company. And yet you have all these Netflixes and HBO Maxes and Amazon Prime Video, all of them competing with one another. And the best way to compete that they have found is by featuring exclusive, high quality, compelling content, your must-see TV, and that's really expensive. And they have to keep churning it out, because otherwise you can just leave after a month. And they know that. So it's very different than when you had to cable companies installing it and having long-term plans and all that. So like what Elsie's talking about, this new kind of innovative content, but also where it can be more efficiently and cost effectively produced. That's music to the ears of all these of all these massive streaming competitors that are out there. And so you're sitting in a good position, Elsie, because they need you. They need you now more than ever, because it's a bloodbath out there with all these streaming services compete, this war of the giants.
Yeah, it's very true. And just to add to that, I think we've been hearing about the golden era of television for the last decade, really, since, The Wire and Sopranos and Mad Men and that kind of stuff. But I think we're entering even a new and bigger golden era, because what's so exciting to us and really affords Trioscope Studios a possibility of becoming successful in the market is that, the streaming services are really, I think, expanding everyone's palette for the types of content that they want. And we're all experiencing this notion of like, oh, well, what can I watch next? What can I watch next? And we're watching things that even 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, we would not have necessarily watched. The story we like to tell is the little grandparents who wouldn't have known, how to get a hold of the Criterion collection or the Sundance
Right,
channel, but
right.
are now watching really in-depth documentaries, which is leading them to then go back and study Errol Morris, or whatever it may be. So yeah, all of that experimentation in consumption gives us an opportunity to give them something new to experiment with, and hopefully a big new shiny object that is more than just the flavor of the month, but something that offers a whole new experience that a lot of different stories can be told in.
Listen, and another thing I write about a lot. I couldn't agree more. It's a new golden age for content creators, those who are creating, because the rule book has been tossed out. You don't have to conform to sitcoms of old of 22 minutes, 30 minutes with commercials, having the same cast of characters that are running throughout and being more predictable formula. Now it's whatever you want it to be. And so that's where you come up with like Game of Thrones, where it was heresy in the past, in the old days, if you killed off a leading character and they were gone in season one. It was never done. And you have all this constant experimentation that's possible now, which is really, really cool. And for creators, looking at each individual platform, like creating for the big screen is different than creating for your mobile device. And that's why you have companies like Quibi who have tried to come out and do something revolutionary on the mobile first side. Not doing well so far with that, but it's part of this massive competition that's going on now. So again, you must feel like you're a kid in the candy store, because it's the rules are gone. You're creating the rules, and you consumers, like students, you're creating the rules because you're voting with the things that you like to watch.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the other really great opportunity that I think that this environment has created is just to lift up voices that were otherwise unheard or sort of relegated to the niche category, right? Not so long ago, the media industry, whether it was feature film or television or otherwise, sort of had to look at the lowest common denominator and say, well, you can't tell that story because it doesn't relate to a big enough audience. And I think streaming has completely upended that and for the better, for society, for art, for these great vibrant voices coming from places that they would have otherwise probably never had a chance to come from.
By the way, so true. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is. And now's the possibility for, exactly right, creators, all kinds of creators. And so just the pure volume and opportunity to reach audiences greater than ever before. One other thing that's important about that from a business side, for you students out there, with traditional media, you had the Nielsen ratings. And so like the Nielsen ratings is what drove advertising and whether shows were considered to be successful or not and worthy of staying on. And so that led to a lot of conformity in and of itself. But now, when you're a streaming service like a Netflix, they don't have advertising dollars. So their measurement for success is if they can keep signing up new users and not so customer retention, customer acquisition, but also retaining you so you don't go someplace else. So customer retention. So that's the only metric that matters to them. So whether a show is, first of all, we don't have visibility into which shows are successful. They don't release those numbers unless they want to. We just don't know. The talent doesn't even know that's associated with it. So it's pretty fascinating. So what defines success for a show is completely different, which again, because of that, a lot of creatives like that, because you're not measured by necessarily the amount of audience, but it's just so that pressure is off to a certain extent, right?
Yes, it is. It sort of diverts a little bit, right? It puts the thing that's most interesting to me about the streaming services is that you're not worried about your sort of overnights, so to speak, right? Like on a regular sort of previous network engagement, you put a show out on premiere night, you're calling the network the next morning if you're a guy like me, trying to find out how it did. And oftentimes the streaming services, because everything is available at all times, those services really are able to use their algorithms to look at things that might be growing slowly, but their data is just so much more advanced within their own platforms, and they're able to kind of see trends that you would never see with the Nielsen system or any other for that matter. And it also opens up all kinds of interesting phenomena for stuff that's been on the platform for 6 months, a year, even longer. Look at the thing that's happened with Avatar: Last Airbender over the last 6 months, right? Like that thing's been out forever, and all of a sudden it became the #1 show on Netflix, a 15-year-old, anime. So what is causing that stuff is interesting to us, the sort of creating those trends. Obviously, when we put out a series on Netflix, we want to see it do really well right away and, all of that. But it's much less discouraging, I think, than the typical sort of, oh, well, we didn't do well last night. And then the network immediately starts, deciding how they're going to step away slowly from it.
So I've taken this conversation a little bit differently than you and I had discussed before, and I want to make sure we get into the core nature versus nurture concept, but really, and then a little bit about your journey too.
Sure.
But really quickly about this, because we're talking about production, we're talking about the streaming world, and we're all sitting back and we're watching more than ever before. Because and a lot of the content is getting exhausted because we're watching so much, so constantly freshening up. And remote production is not necessarily the way that the media and entertainment world has worked. And so now with the COVID-19 pandemic, and you're working from home, I'm working from home, the creatives are all working from home. I was talking to another production company yesterday. And so from what I understand, now there's this massive innovation going on from tech companies who are trying to help this business by creating more effective remote production and collaborative production capabilities and tools. So do you believe that the pandemic is going to change things from just a pure production standpoint as well permanently, or do you think it's a short-term sort of thing?
I think there are things that will probably stick around forever. Some things that we're finding, there are some really great tech tools that were already on the market that have became a lot more valuable, as these realities have set in. Things like QTake, for example, which is a remote VTR product that allows you to view everything the cameras are viewing, like a video village, but doing that remotely and over the cloud. So it's for playback. So, I don't think that there's a world in the near future where directors or, filmmakers are going to not be on set and working directly with actors and having that human interaction. But I do think that reducing the number of people on set we've seen the pathway to that. And that we think is beneficial in a number of ways, not the least of which is making, high end or any type of television or film is quite expensive, and an awful lot of that cost is just labor costs of people on set and moving people into one location. And if you can take some of the load off of that stuff and put more money on the screen, well, that allows the creators to do more. It allows the buyers to buy more, and it allows more to be produced, which ultimately benefits audiences. Our own particular experience with this has been that our process was already, and I don't want to sound in any way opportunistic, but our process was already sort of geared for this style of production. We shoot everything in a customized, sort of custom outfitted environment, which we call the Triosphere. It's a customized studio environment. And one of the big emphasis that we have put on that is reducing the number of people on set, reducing the number of actors that are required at any given time, and technicians. So a Trioscope set almost never has more than 50 people on set at any one time, and that, compare that to a Fast and Furious film or something.
Yeah.
That would be the wardrobe department on a film like that. So the other things that I think will probably, to answer your question, stick around after this are just a greater institutional awareness, operational awareness of sanitation on set, some production that we've done recently, and everybody we're hearing is doing the same thing, is sanitizing their sets either with UV lighting or, good old fashioned elbow grease, as it were, or both. And I think stuff like that is helpful. The way that food service is being done on set is changing quite a bit, I think, to more of an individualized thing. And certainly over time, I think it's probably just good business to keep people healthy. I've been on many sets where, on day 3, somebody comes in with a cold, and by day 10, everybody on set is now sharing it.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's really important to kind of understand where you guys sit in the forces that are around you and how you're leading both from an innovation on the content side, but also because you're leading from innovation, your head wasn't in the ground and doing traditional things, but really looking ahead and taking action, which is a big theme. But because of that, you positioned yourself very well for the forces that need you. So that's a testament to you guys. So before we get into your process, because I want to spend, I've already spent a lot of time here. Tell us a little bit about how you broke into the business and some insights you can give to the students out there who are passionate about this space and want to find a way in themselves.
Yes, absolutely. My particular journey was pretty circuitous, and it had everything to do, I think, with just what was in my view as I was coming up, from high school and in college. I didn't know, I had no concept that you could do what I now do as a job was even a job. And so it was definitely iterative, and I sort of was able to follow a path that sort of lit itself very dimly along the way. And so the way I started was I knew that, I was a creative person that generates a lot of ideas and, thought, and probably in an innovative way at any given time. And I knew I wanted to tell stories. The only route that I saw as a young person was, or the thing that seemed the most interesting to me was advertising, graphic design, these kinds of things. So I couldn't get anybody to hire me with no experience in that realm. And so I just started a small design firm, hung out a shingle, as it were, was able to kind of do enough sort of speculative work that a few clients came our way, and, built it from there, transitioned from that small kind of 3-person shop that we had into progressively larger and more legitimate sort of ad agencies. And, I think the style of thinking that I was bringing to those agencies was at times not always comfortable. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was, really setting out to kind of change the way things worked and and what I was faced with was, often, a lot of times big brands, big companies who liked to do things the way they wanted to do them. And, even if that meant 0.5% growth, or relatively unmeasurable success for their, communication and advertising or storytelling efforts, that was okay with them. So, but along the way, did a lot of really cool work, made Super Bowl commercials, and found my way with just, with things that were well above my pay grade, very luckily coming across my desk. In, I would say around 2007.
I want a couple things there, because there are themes that I think are important pointing out, because they're recurring themes, and that may be helpful for the students out there, but recurring with essentially all the speakers that have been on so far, all my guests. First of all, nonlinear path. Yep. You didn't have it figured out. Certainly, when you were a young person in college, you didn't know that it would have led to this. It's not necessarily you knew you were interested in creativity. You said that no one would hire you, or you tried, and you were trying, so you had no special ins to get into the business, but nonetheless, you look where you are. And you said luckily, but I think I would say more fortuitously. And the reason why is that fortuity, at least in my view, is that you put yourself out there. Like you were tenacious, you were active. So you, it's very, like, we've all been rejected. I certainly have. And it's very disheartening at times. But you got to just, as this, it sounds so easy and it's not so easy. So I recognize that, but really just take some action and keep being tenacious about it, because that does work. That does work. If you have the passion and you show people and create relationships that where people understand that passion and they get to know you and they want to get to know you, then they want to champion you, and that's all part of it. And you didn't have it all figured out. And so those are just themes, I think, that to give some peace of mind to the young people out there who may think, wow, it's pandemic times, I'm kind of at a standstill now. That's going to really impact my career long term, and you know what the opportunities. And I would say, look back at all the speakers, including LC. Not true. It's that just take some action, whether it's mental health, whether it's just doing some experimentation on your own, or take advantage of Creative University and the internships. Like, take advantage of them. And just do that and you'll learn a lot. It may not lead to something, but that's how it happens. So anyhow, I just wanted to.
Yeah, could I add just one thing that you reminded me of, Peter, which is that the notion of rejection. And I think we will all find ourselves having a special relationship with, if we're trying to do anything in this world, with rejection. And what I have found is that rejection is the most powerful motivating force that can lead to finding, you know, your version of success. So steer toward it. You know, everything that I can point to that I've done in any successful way has been because I was rejected 4 or 5 times prior, and that gave me the necessary sort of cheat codes or breadcrumb path to get to a successful outcome. A good example of that is early on when you know, when we admired Adult Swim and really wanted to be, you know, making shows for them like so many people do, but we didn't have any real knowledge of what that would take. We were able to get a meeting from a friend of a friend. This is many, many years ago. We walk in, the head of Adult Swim is there, very revered, famous person, and we present our presentation, and he just looks across the table and he says, "You expect me to put that next to Robot Chicken?" And I said, "No, I don't. Sorry. Sorry this ever happened." And I walked out of the door, and we licked our wounds for 6 months, and we were, you know, upset, and that guy doesn't know what he's thinking about, but we kept at it, and we started to realize, oh, right, I see what he's saying. I see how we can grow. And we really pushed our boundaries because of that one meeting, because of that one piece of rejection, and eventually ended up doing lots of business and becoming great friends with the whole company, including that guy who ran it, and still to this day do business with those guys. So
What a great, yeah, that's another great lesson there, that you got rejected. It sounded like the meeting was certainly not a positive one at the moment.
It was painful.
But now look, you were able to transform that because you didn't take it personally. You may have taken it personally for a while.
I absolutely did. But after we got over that and got to work, that's when we couldn't have gotten to work. Did we not know, you know, if we hadn't had the rejection?
And so, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the cliche, you can't be afraid to fail, which again sounds easier said than done. But you hear it again time and time from speakers that everybody has professionally failed, you know, whatever that means. You didn't get that job you thought you were going to get. You didn't get that client you thought you were getting. It is disheartening, but you learn so much by that. And if you're not failing, you're not putting yourself out there enough too. You know, so we don't have that much time. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of your process for what you kind of call your process for creative people with prolific idea generation. That's how you told it to me, but it's the nature to nurturing of your ideas. And you actually developed a process for this for yourself, but it's pretty fascinating. So lay it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the headline here is that we are all creative people, and whether you are, you know, using a pen to write a story or a brush to paint a picture or create businesses or whatever it may be, or all of those things, you know, I think our ability, what I have found is that our ability to lead a fulfilling life where you are generating ideas that turn into meaningful content or entrepreneurial endeavors or anything else really comes down to how you embrace the slog of that, because it definitely is a slog. And I have found that being more organized and learning how to refine your process for your ideas and how you get them out of yourself and into the world will allow you to bring more of your ideas to fruition, generate more ideas in general, and derive more fulfillment, you know, in the long run. And I think, you know, when done right, ideas, if you are somebody who has a lot of ideas, you might find yourself feeling like, well, they're sort of clogging the works, or one is bringing the others down. And what I have found is that the more organized you are, the more that the ideas can feed on each other and actually cause, you know, all of them kind of create a sum that's greater than, or a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And so, you know, I think for me, what I have done is I call it the car wash. And, you know, it's not a system. It doesn't have a TM at the end. It's not, I don't think I'll be putting this in a book anytime soon.
But maybe you will.
maybe I should. I don't know.
Yeah, I loved it yesterday when we were talking about it. You called it your personal car wash, and it'll be in your nuggets.
Yeah, it's the way I think about it, because I want to take an idea through a process and hopefully come out the other end executing as many ideas as I can. And so just recognizing those individual stations along the way, I think, is why I think about it as a car wash. So anyway, so the quick kind of rundown of those stations that I mentioned is, the first one is the conception standpoint, and that is the most sort of nature comes from. You can't define where it comes from often. It just sort of pops into your head, or it slaps you in front of the, you know, across the face. And what I have found is the more that moment, that flash of inspiration hits you, the more that you recognize how that feels, the more that you call it what it is, and the more that you embrace that kind of exuberance that you feel when you've had your first inklings of an idea is very important. And know that you're in that state, and know that what your job is at that moment is to gather as much of that idea, or sort of extract as much of that idea in its pure form out, you know, onto a piece of paper or into your phone as you possibly can. It's about, you know, seizing that mode, I think, is the point. That, as we all have felt, you know, dissipates after you have either you've kind of just like ignored it, or you've gotten it all out. But eventually the adrenaline, you know, goes away. And it's very important, I think, at that moment, to, having slept on it, think about that idea in terms of, all right, well, what is that idea in terms of what category of my life? Is that an entrepreneurial idea? Is that a creative idea? If I'm a, you know,
LC, let me ask you one question about that. I'm just curious about just the logistics even of that. Just personally, because I've spoken to a lot of creatives, and it's fascinating to hear how ideas come to them.
Right.
Do they come to you, like, have you found in your career that they come to you like when you're waking up, or you're going to bed, or you're in the middle of the night, or just throughout the day, there's no rhyme nor reason to it?
I find that it's a great question. It's all of the above for me. The places that I've identified in my life where they probably are the most concentrated are, for me anyway, just before I go to sleep or just after I wake up.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's the reason why I asked, is because I hear that a lot.
Yeah,
I hear that. But go ahead.
Yeah. So once that idea is, you know, you've seen it for just a moment, I think it's important to think about the category it fits in your life for one key reason, and that is, it tells you who in your life to talk to about it. And I think that's a very important aspect of it, is to just run it by a colleague or a creative mentor, if it's a creative idea, or if you've got an entrepreneurial, you know, contact of any sort. You know, this may be an idea to change the way renewable energy works or something, but all you know is somebody who has a small business down the street, perfectly okay. But just knowing that, okay, I need to talk to an entrepreneur, or, you know, whatever it may be, I think it really helps you envision just a very basic pathway that you would need to take if you decided to pursue it. And I think that's a key component, that if you reserve the right to pursue an idea and just explore it in these kind of, you know, incremental ways, that's a big part of at least my own personal way of not letting the ideas kind of clog the system. Because if everything is kind of banging around in your head and you haven't really told yourself which ideas are the ones you're going to pursue today, tomorrow, or the next day, then you probably won't be very efficient about thinking about them nor executing them.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think that kind of efficiency is something that I certainly struggle with. So as I was telling you yesterday in advance of this, I need your process.
Some days I need it too. I won't say that that it's perfect by any means.
But one thing on that, just going back to the ideas coming to you in the nighttime, and it's a theme that I hear over and over again, and maybe this is obvious to everybody. Keep a pad of paper by your bed, or a note, something. I email myself. It's crazy, but go ahead.
Yeah, the other place that, just to go back to your question about when they come, strenuous exercise is the other place that.
Interesting.
I have started to realize that old notion of, well, let's sleep on it, is very valuable. But for me, I'm a jogger, so jogging on it is my other thing that I do. If I'm trying to solve a problem and I need new ideas to do so, I find the best way to do it is to get my body moving, do for me a lot of cardio, take my mind off of it in some ways, and then immediately my mind will go, oh right, it's that instead of that.
Yeah, cool.
So anyway, once it's categorized and you've kind of seen a very basic pathway, if you were to pursue it, who you'd talk to about doing so. The next is the sort of the nurture side of it, which is, all right, now the hard work really happens, right? You have to figure out, you have to really kind of examine in your own mind sort of what excites me about this idea, but also like flesh out what problem does this idea solve, sort of what value does it have, what opportunities does it seize, and then who, what, where, and how will I talk about the idea. You really, that's where you start to put the meat on the bone, if you will. And the best way that I find to do that is, and this doesn't have to be anything formal, it can be, but it doesn't have to be, but I call it the loud bar test. And that is, can you communicate this idea in a loud bar where everybody is not paying attention and the music is loud, in a way that gets the point across enough to at least get feedback on that idea? And if you can do that, then to me that's a really good step for moving that idea to the next stage. If passing it around, telling some friends in that kind of environment, sort of raises some eyebrows, then I think, that tells you probably have something. And I think you have to be willing to set aside your pride and set aside, a lot of things to hear that kind of response. If you don't get, if you sort of get like, well, I don't know, that doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it. It might just mean you need to communicate it better. You need to think more about it. You need to refine and develop the idea more.
Yeah, and that's going to need to be modified a little bit now to be the loud virtual bar.
Fair enough.
Sadly, we're all looking. I'll speak for myself. I'm looking forward to when I can go back into one. But okay.
Yeah, fair enough. And rarely do it's more of a thought experiment than anything. It's like, would this pass the loud bar test if I really wanted to go stand in an annoying loud bar? So certainly most of that, I think, a lot of that can be done just by you being your own worst critic in that particular moment of the process. The next stage, if you feel like, all right, yes, that is a compelling loud bar pitch, if you will, is to just sequence and prioritize that idea based on the other things that you're pursuing at that time. And that, your parents have probably given you in one way or the other that advice about, you know, keeping your priorities about school over, you know, fun time or whatever. But this is really about individualizing your ideas in your own mind, giving them their own kind of, I call it gravity, but just seeing them in your own mind as these sort of spheres of you know, interest, and deciding sort of what sequence you want to pursue them. And your own criteria will be your own criteria. But for me, I think it's about, you know, the timeliness of that opportunity and whatever financial goals that may sort of be associated with my life at any given time. It doesn't mean you shouldn't prioritize something if it just seems like it would be of a very fulfilling prospect, because ultimately, you know, those things are important too. But, you know, I think it's just a matter of sort of understanding, you know, what you're looking at here. If I go into this and knowing that every single thing worth doing is a slog and really difficult to do, and you're going to face rejection, as we talked about earlier, and you're going to have to rework your idea a million times for it to succeed, I think it just tells you, okay, looking at it from that perspective, we'll say, okay, that one's the worth right now. That's the one that I could really see getting off the ground. That's the one I can see working, you know, 23 hours a day on. And at least that's my criteria for what to put in the first, second, third, and so forth slots. But then I always make it a point to keep one slot, at least one slot open, to feed the just that sort of emotional. I might not be able to rationally say this is an idea that should be pursued today because it would create financial gain, or, you know, would do it, you know, sort of meet my rational goals for any given moment. But it's just something that I know would provide personal fulfillment for me. Those are stories, right? So those are stories that I know I really want to tell. It might not be a story that I think is marketable or commercial in my business, but it's just something that those characters that I believe in, or a story that I believe in, or both. And I just want to continue to nurture that. And I leave a little bit of my own bandwidth open, knowing that it will ultimately kind of get backburnered from time to time. But I keep that in just for kind of feeding the soul. And then
critical.
Yeah, it's critical. It really is. And then once you have, I find it to be, once you have those slots filled, and they're going to change as new ideas come, you're going to constantly reorder those. But having those and seeing them filled in your own mind is great freedom, you know, because it tells you, okay, these are the 5 or whatever, however number of things that you have. These are the things I'm doing right now. And that compartmentalization, I think, is very important. And as I was telling you yesterday, Peter, I actually compartmentalize those ideas physically. For me, I put them in paper grocery bags. And the reason I do that is because I want, and what I put in there is just my sketches, my notes, emails, all the sort of files on a particular endeavor. And I put those in paper bags, and it allows me to then put those paper bags in these sort of storage bins, and I put them in order of priority. That way I know that idea is in that bag. And just for me, as a person who thinks very tangibly, I know that all my ideas are in that bag, and I don't have to think about those, because all I have to do to get to the minutia of that idea is pop that bag open, right?
That's pretty fascinating. And just really quickly, because we don't have much time, sure, but mention the Stanley Kubrick, which is,
yeah,
he had something. So the famed director, for all of you, I'm sure most of you know that, 2001: Space Odyssey and The Shining. Stanley Kubrick.
I stole the notion of that idea from hearing that Stanley Kubrick did a similar thing on a much bigger scale. He was making films in the 60s before your personal database allowed you to manage large volumes of data. So he created these big sort of horizontal Rolodexes for all the minutia, tiny microscopic ideas that go into making a film. Huge films like 2001: A Space Odyssey. The most famous example is he never got it to the screen, but he worked for decades on a Napoleon film. And the huge card file that he kept on that is now sort of a relic of what he was doing. But it really allowed him to, once he had a lot of that, it allowed him to have quick reference to his ideas. And I think that's the point I'm making with my paper bags. You'll likely find your own version of that. Certainly feel free to steal my paper bag idea if you think it's valuable.
By the way, I don't know if maybe you're going into this now, or maybe it's relevant directly to what you've already said, but we have somebody who has this question.
Sure.
What would be your advice to someone who has a large swath of ideas, but doesn't know quite where to begin?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think to a large extent, that's sort of what I'm talking about with this. I think if you really, I think it helps to, if they're all in your head, get them out of your head and put them on note cards or something, and then put them on the wall and look at them and start to categorize them and prioritize them based on whatever your goals are. If creating financial stability or deriving money, which obviously everybody is going to have that as a key priority, is number one, then look at the ones that can create that the fastest, or you believe can create that the fastest. Whatever your top priorities are or your top goals are, prioritize those ideas based on that. And then, as I said, develop those ideas, be hard on those ideas, learn to communicate those ideas.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to 1,000,000 times to yourself, to people that you enlist to help you, realize those ideas. And ultimately, there's going to come a time when you have to ask somebody else for permission, whether that's money or otherwise, to bring that idea to full fruition. For me, this takes the form of developing television show and film ideas that I ultimately have to go to a studio or go to, Netflix or whomever it is and say, this is an idea we want to do. Will you allow us to do it with your money?
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have their version of that.
Yes.
So hopefully that's helpful. And to that point, which is sort of the next stop on my car wash, which is defending your ideas. I think prepare for the onslaught is what I often tell people in our organization, which is, you have to depersonalize an idea, at least in terms of a thought experiment, to be tough on it, because everyone else is going to be, right? And in that process of, you will ultimately find the weaknesses or things that you could communicate better, or flaws of logic, or whatever it may be, within your own ideas, and be able to strengthen those if you will take the time. And it's not always a fun process, but go through it. I highly recommend it. It will take an idea that may have wobbly parts and make it very foundationally strong.
Yeah.
And then, once you've done that, and if an idea has stayed standing in your own mind throughout that process, chances are you have something. And now it's time to execute it. And I find that if you do take the time to organize those thoughts, categorize, work on communicating those ideas, and which ultimately is all about refining an idea and strengthening it, then execution, the path for execution is made very clear in that process. Some key decisions that you'll need to make once you make that decision to execute, go, yes, that is the thing I'm going to do right now. I'm going to start that business. I'm going to write that story, or whatever it is to ask yourself, does this idea need to be protected in any tangible way? If it's an invention, I was joking with you the other day, but actually dead serious, Peter. I have an idea that's been banging around in my head for a long time about a better back scratcher. And it turns out,
I'll buy one.
It turns out that there are several hundred filed and received patents for different types of back scratchers in this world. So if you are entering a space that is crowded, you're going to want to look at how you can protect that idea. If it's a story, that's a little more of a nuanced conversation, but ultimately there are ways to protect your intellectual property, and you'll need to just think about, what can I afford to protect, what should be protected, what is overkill, and what can I live, what can I sleep at night knowing what level of risk can I take if I take this idea out into the world? And oftentimes the answer to that last question is you're going to have to take a lot of risk. You're going to have to put your idea in the hands of a lot of people that you're going to have to trust. And I always—
That's very true, by the way, both in the creative side, because in the creative side, no matter how much you try to protect things, Hollywood and media business is notorious for that kind of thing being, you know, ideas, that those who take the ideas, they'll say ideas are in the air. And so
it is. It is true.
And then on the business side, like if somebody's raising money for a venture from venture capital or from somebody, and you're creating a deck, no venture capitalist is going to keep it confidential. So don't even, you know, it won't happen. You're not going to get an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality. By the way, we only have a couple minutes, so I want to finish that thought, and then I want to get to a question, and then a couple closing points.
Sure. Yeah. The only thing I would add is in closing with protectability is understand that, you know, you can sort of choke an idea out by trying to protect it too much, because getting it out into the world and nurturing that idea, getting feedback on that idea is how it will ultimately succeed. And just remember this, and this is something that I have to tell myself all the time, it's really hard to make things happen. And just know that if you have done all the work, as I've described in my car wash, to refine an idea, you are giving yourself a head start on your idea that will make it harder for other people to, you know, to ultimately come behind you and steal it or whatever. So just know that most people in this world are not out to steal your ideas, and you are your best. You are really, for all intents and purposes, the only champion of your ideas. And you know, just take that risk. It is worth it. And even if you have an idea stolen along the way, you'll have others that aren't. So go for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that if you're too careful about anything, then you're going to be paralyzed. Your idea is going to be paralyzed anyhow. Yep. So I'm going to ask the question, and we only have a couple of minutes. So how do you balance maintaining your creative vision with feedback you get from the business side of the industry responsible for the distribution?
It's a great question, and it's one that I think takes a big gulp sometimes. And I think if you talk to 10 creatives, you would get 10 different answers to that question. For us, what we try to do at Trioscope is be as objective as we possibly can. That's very hard to do, and we have put so much blood, sweat, and tears into a piece, and then feedback comes that, oh, well, it doesn't do this or that. It's a two-step process for us. We say, is that a valid note? And are we willing to implement it in a way that we believe would not compromise the material? And knowing that if we do not implement that note or accept that feedback, we probably will not move forward with that idea. And is it worth it? And if you just kind of take that calculus and constantly ask yourself that, most of the time what you'll find is, okay, we can implement that note in these creative ways, maybe not exactly how it was posed to us, but if it stands between us and executing it fully or not executing it at all, it's worth it. And so we try to keep a pretty pragmatic, you know, approach to that.
Yeah, no, great. Listen, I want to just give a personal thank you to you, because LC was, when we launched this organically 2.5 months ago now, about 2.5 months ago, LC was amongst the first to reach out and say, hey, I want to be part of it. I love the mission. He just was very generous with his time. And LC speaking, he's open to being a mentor for somebody. Already, as I said, created some internship opportunities. And so I believe there's one more internship that's available. So if anybody's interested, it's a fascinating company, and you can reach out to me and I'll connect you with LC. Take a look at the process for doing so at the Creative University website. I want to point, so thank you, LC. You're great. I love the passion of it. I want to point out a couple things, and you'll find this interesting too. Our very first session, and I have to point this out because this is breaking news. Our very first session was with TikTok's new CEO, Kevin Mayer. And that was in June, just a couple months ago. And Kevin came from Disney, was one of the leading execs, like at the very top of Disney, this massive global organization. So it was a very big story when he left to become the head of TikTok. Well, today, Kevin resigned from the company. And that's massive news in the media and entertainment space. I've already spoke with the press about it. And it's, you know, the world for Kevin changed the minute he entered the doorway of TikTok for TikTok, because TikTok was something you all use, but it has become, like, literally after Kevin joined, it was thrust into the line of sight of geopolitics, like right in the line of, so it's a radically different world that TikTok had become just from the time that he joined it, and completely out of his hands. So I don't have any special insights there other than the fact that it couldn't have been a positive experience when you join something to transform it. And he's an innovator and a great innovator. And then you are just you are bombarded with nothing but geopolitics and divisive, all kinds of political issues. So read more about that, because that literally broke today. The deck is available if anybody wants this deck, because it has a lot of information about Creative University. The link is in the chat. Anam shared that with you all. The video session is going to be available perhaps even later today, but certainly by Monday. So this session, and then we have like 8 other sessions. They're great. It's great content, everybody, and you can listen to it even though the video, obviously you can listen to it as a podcast, but we're going to be making this into a formal podcast. And then tonight is Claro at 5 p.m. And I also believe from Atlanta, of all things. She's in LA now, I think, but I know that came from Atlanta.
That's cool. I don't think I knew that, but
yeah.
I'm a huge fan.
So this was not by design that it was the Atlanta day, but it has become that. So everybody, Elsie, thanks again. Really appreciate your time and your participation in Creative University. Everybody who's watching, this is for you guys. So send your ideas of what you want, what matters to you, what you would like us to cover. Like I said, we're going to have some mental wellness sessions, mental health sessions, student sessions without, you know, me or others in it, where it's just that. So it's a little bit more of that. And there it is. Learn more about Creative University. We want to help you. We want to help you and bring inspirational, great, innovative, diverse voices to you and help you really get real, tangible, positive experiences that lead you into your career already on day one. So,
Peter, can I add one last thing?
Yeah.
This was never said to me when I was coming up, but I wish it had been. You know, I feel very fortunate to be in a position where I probably do have some things that I can teach young people and mentor in a certain way. And it's an open invitation. Yeah, get a hold of Peter, and I'm busy as everybody is, but know that you know somebody because you know me now.
That's awesome. I love it. I love the enthusiasm and the passion, and just the passion for helping people out. That's very cool.
Awesome.
So I always just quickly point out again what the Creative U mission is, why we created this. It's a pure industry give back, and that's why we're able to attract such great people to this. And so I'm not going to get into all the specifics. You'll find out a lot of information on the Creative University website. But the goal is for you young people, students, high school students, college students who are passionate about the media and entertainment and tech world and want to learn about it, but also want to cross that velvet rope into it and explore careers in it. And that's what we're here for. So you can learn more on the Creative University website. There's a lot there already in a short period of time, because we started this very organically. My wife and I, my family, my daughter, my son, we just wanted to create something very cool that could be immediately tangible for you young people, students, and it's democratized access. So whoever really wants it, give immediate mentorships, internships through the process. Already, we've had 9 great speakers, plus 2 more learning sessions, and more of those are coming. 8 companies are offering internships right now and opportunities. 8 companies are participating in this already. And we've already placed a few interns, and some of which are paid internships, which is great too. And Trioscope actually has been great. And we'll talk about, there's an open internship, at least one that's open right now. But more on the internships, they're now posted. They are now posted on the Creative University website, so you can see what the companies are. One actual industry job has come out of it already. So that's great. That person is on this session, I'm sure. One TV interview with another person. So a lot of stuff. And then ongoing collaboration, like very active involvement by a core group of people. Upcoming sessions, Jenny Morris on September 1st. Register for that one. She heads up content at HBO Max. HBO Max is now owned by AT&T. HBO Max is one of the most important streaming services that's trying to challenge Netflix right now. So that'll be really good. She'll talk about her journey, but also what she does, how they make their decisions at HBO Max, but her advice to young people who are breaking into the business, looking for internships, things like that. And then right now I'm thinking about doing this Convince Me I'm Wrong session, my first one, where I'll lay out the case for Netflix. Everybody loves it. We all watch it, but why I don't think its business model works, and that ultimately it's going to need to sell itself. I'm a bear, I'm a contrarian, and so you can challenge me on that one. Learn more about Creative University on the website. We're going to be talking about mental health and wellness issues too, including some student-led sessions. Those are upcoming too. Lots there. For all of you who are watching, I'll see many of you later on tonight. See ya.